It's wonderful to be able to join you here at the National Press Club. At the ABC, we're in the midst of something that's very rare in media circles and rarer still in Canberra, a well-planned, well-spirited CEO transition. This happens about as rarely as the arrival of Halley's Comet. Like Prime Ministers, media executives usually leave the same way they arrive, fired with enthusiasm. I've loved being Managing Director of the ABC, but felt strongly that after 2 terms it marked the right time to leave, both for me and the ABC. And I'll be very pleased to have time to work alongside Michelle Guthrie when she returns to Australia in April, before she takes the reins of the corporation in May. And I'm sure she's going to do well and, like me, will feel honoured to have the opportunity of leading one of Australia's most loved public institutions. Until then, it's hardly a coast to the line. There's lots going on and lots at stake. Crucially for the ABC, this is a triennial funding year, and in the May budget, we're seeking funding that will underpin all the ABC's activities until the end of June 2019. That budget night in May is one of consequence for the ABC. The next 3 years of funding will shape the organisation's future role in Australia's turbulent media landscape. A lot can happen in 3 years, but the pattern is already set. The potential is there for us to see. And it would not be unreasonable to anticipate the following in the next 3 years: the demise of weekday print editions of some of the nation's most important newspapers, the closure of many regional newspapers and the continued loss of local content makers in the bush, with fewer regional radio and television services. We might anticipate further dramatic newsroom cuts and the increased siphoning of advertising revenues from traditional media players to newer giants like Google, Facebook and Apple. We might expect to see pressure from commercial TV networks to lessen their Australian content requirements and see a continued erosion of the percentage of Australian content on our screens as massive global libraries are unlocked through YouTube, Netflix and other SVODs. All of these scenarios are possible, many are likely, some are simply inevitable. And this isn't idle speculation, it's simply a continuation of well-established trends that are being accelerated by other factors, such as the growth of fast broadband and the ubiquity of mobile devices. Closed local media markets have become open global ones. The old link between locally created content and local advertising markets has been broken. The push to get audiences to pay for content is constrained by the countless content choices they have and by the quality of the cheap or free global offering. It's hard to see a traditional news or broadcast media company anywhere in the world that is thriving through their traditional business model. Deep-pocketed global giants and nimble upstarts are ambitious and on the move. And under changing ownership models, rich old-school proprietors who are willing to trade profit for political influence have, in the most part, been replaced by media companies with open share registers focused exclusively on profit and growth. We might regret the slashing of newsrooms and commercial TV filled with endless reality imports, but this is simply commercial media being commercial, acting in the interests of their shareholders. But where does it lead us? And what are the implications for Australian culture and conversations and stories? The paradox of the age of plenty is that we now have so much more to watch, more to listen to, more to read, and a post-Sopranos world that's so rich in quality television that not even binge watchers can keep up with it. Yet amidst all this richness, the share of Australian content is shrinking, overwhelmed by the flood of global content on multi-channels, pay TV and SVOD services. It's one of the mixed blessings of being in a country of 24 million speaking a language that 750 million others speak. In entertainment, information and news, the impact is evident. Fewer journalists in smaller newsrooms, regional shutdowns with the loss of local voices, more cooking shows, home renovations, celebrities in the jungle. Reduced investment in quality television production that informs and enriches Australian culture and identity. Shane Warne drinking a rat offal smoothie on primetime TV is possibly just a sign of the times. An example of one answer to the question of how commercial media might best build shareholder returns. It's inevitably short-term thinking driven by a market pressure to produce the highest return for the lowest cost in the fastest time. But if we're concerned about the long-term effect of this pattern on our culture, the single most important thing the government can do is appropriately invest in the one segment of the media market that's specifically not set up to produce a profit, and that is the ABC. A well-funded ABC is one sure bet in an uncertain, unstable media world. It is the way of ensuring that Australian conversations and cultures and stories, the stories that shape our Australian identity, are present in our media mix, available free of charge in every Australian home. A way to guarantee a steady stream of quality and innovative programs and services that produce a social profit of enriching and informing citizens, rather than simply seeing audiences only as consumers. And isn't this the reason why we have a public media service? This is what the public expects of the ABC, it's why they support it, and it's why they want it properly funded. As I set to leave the ABC, I see some significant challenges met and overcome, and I also see enduring challenges waiting to be dealt with. Of course, I'm pleased by the ABC's successful transformation, how it's become a public broadcaster in the digital era, and all the possibilities that have been realised thanks to an outstanding and highly committed staff. And I'm heartened that the ABC still generates such widespread, passionate support from its owners, the Australian people, with news poll measured approval ratings remaining in the mid-80s. The same poll shows the public overwhelmingly believes the ABC is fair and balanced. The ABC continues to be the nation's most trusted and respected media organisation. But inevitably there are testing times ahead. Some challenges are common to every media organisation in a disruptive, dramatically changing environment. The ABC has shown that it can and must adapt and evolve to meet these particular challenges. But the greatest challenge to the future of the ABC, ironically, comes from those who fund it on behalf of its owners. Today's government, future governments. Will the ABC be granted the resources to grow and evolve to meet changing audience demands and expectations? Or will it have to contend with a budget that offers it no alternative but to cut, shrink and retreat? Let's look at those issues. If we compare the ABC of today with the ABC of several decades ago, a few things really stand out. Firstly, the ABC once had a much bigger budget, around $200 million more per annum in real terms, and it had far more people, about 2,000 additional staff than it has today. It was a well-padded, bureaucratic public broadcaster, a picture of the ABC long out of date, but which some critics still conveniently carry with them. Not only was it a bigger organisation, its share of GDP and slice of the overall government budget was much bigger. It was 0.14% of GDP 30 years ago. Today it's 0.5%. The ABC's share of government expenditure is effectively at its lowest level in decades now, and the per capita spending on public broadcasting is significantly lower than in many other nations, and dramatically lower, of course, than the BBC. Yet when the ABC had far more resources, it produced a fraction of the content that it produces today. It was effectively one television channel and 2 radio networks. Today's ABC consists of 4 television networks, 5 radio networks and more on digital, a host of online services and sites, including the very popular ABC iView. We've created places to showcase ABC programs and Australian content makers, as well as places to showcase talent outside the ABC from audiences, as we do on Triple J Unearthed and ABC Open. We've come a very long way from the image of Auntie that prompted Senator Jim McClelland as chairman of the Senate Standing Committee on Broadcasting 40 years ago to describe the ABC as a dithering, timid, old fuddy-duddy. Some of the innovation and news services have been expressly funded by government in response to submissions from the ABC. And that's how we delivered the children's channel, ABC3, and how we expanded our drama slate, and how that great regional Australia project, ABC Open, came into being. But many of the other news services that have developed in recent years, such as ABC News 24 and iView and nearly all our digital activity over the past decade, have been funded from within the ABC's existing budget, without one additional cent from taxpayers. The shift to digital is both necessary and it's expensive. To respond to public expectations so we could fund and deliver these services, the ABC continually renewed its priorities, embraced new technology and the changing work practices that came with them. This double-barrelled approach, additional funding from government where necessary, along with the ABC's own efficiency-based reinvestments, delivered a sweeping transformation of the ABC and set up the digital era. And it's kept our weekly reach into Australian homes high and our approval ratings exceptionally high. And when it comes to quality, people believe the gap between what the ABC offers and what is offered elsewhere remains large, and according to Newspoll, that gap is increasing. The ABC's innovation, its investment in quality and distinctive services, its mission to serve Australians everywhere, has led many, including the Prime Minister, to conclude that the ABC is now more important than ever. Given the ABC's popularity, distinctiveness and importance, I'm surprised at how aggressive some political opponents of the ABC continue to be. I'm not particularly worried about the newspaper polemicists, the shock jocks or even the advocates from the think tanks who often, while calling the ABC irrelevant, rush to be on the ABC or campaign for their own ABC programs. You know, that's their business. But the response of some politicians to the ABC, on the other hand, is important, because when it comes to the ABC, they have real power. And you'd have thought politicians would be more focused on what the public thinks of a public institution, so intrinsic to the public good. The ABC is popular, but it's not perfect. Flawed at times, with mistakes triggered by a tyranny of live microphones or rushed judgments, occasional blind spots, misreading of public taste, stories overlooked or perspectives not considered. At times we make mistakes that give our critics a very easy ride. We do recognise the trust the public places in us, and we are constantly looking to improve our performance. In 2013, the ABC chairman announced here at the Press Club that the ABC board would be commissioning external editorial audits of the ABC's coverage of contentious topics. And they followed an earlier series established soon after I joined the ABC. Last week, I announced the creation of a new role of editorial director to ensure consistent and mandatory referrals for editorial advice on significant and controversial matters, to oversee standards, training and guidance. But I believe our editorial and creative performance to be very strong. The evidence suggests that this is a view shared by the Australian people. The public judge and value the ABC by what it gets right. Some politicians and partisans tend to judge it only by what sometimes goes wrong. And that's why 84% of the Australian public believe the ABC is valuable or highly valuable. That's why the ABC is consistently rated as the nation's most trusted media service. The public wants the diversity of content that the ABC delivers. They want programming that stands out clearly as being driven by something other than profit-seeking. They want a commitment to diversity and plurality. They admire the independent, courageous journalism, the celebration of culture and the brilliant storytelling. And they know it won't all be perfect. They forgive the lapses, knowing that we will be committed to doing the best we can. While some politicians vehemently oppose the ABC, there are far more who'll tell you that they love the ABC, while occasionally taking issue with some programming. But the public who fund the ABC really want to see actions, not words. To see that support expressed in practical, powerful ways. To see the ABC's independence safeguarded and to ensure the ABC is adequately funded to fulfil its charter and its future. So let's talk about promises. The ABC entered the last election campaign with commitments from all major parties to maintain funding for the ABC. And of course, the promise was made deliberately and repeated often before and after the election by Tony Abbott, because all politicians know how popular the ABC is. The public appreciates its value. The public don't want its funding cut. Yet the subsequent decisions made by the Abbott government will strip $350 million from the ABC over a 5-year period, with the removal of funding for international broadcasting and the $250 million cut from the ABC's core budget. The largest cut came after a departmental efficiency review that was fully supported by the ABC. We've been in the business of finding efficiencies for years. We want to be as efficient and effective as we can be with our owners' money, whilst delivering the content and services they demand. News 24, iView, Triple J Unearthed, Double J, the websites and apps, podcasts and streaming services, every one of them was funded by ABC efficiency savings that was then reinvested in services that have come to mean so much to Australian audiences. It's not just a great economic story and a cultural story, it's a great business story, a story of agility, innovation and renewal. And the ABC worked with the government review to find further savings, but rather than keep its election promise and allow the ABC to reinvest these funds for digital content and services, the government axed the funding from the ABC budget. Instead, to make vital digital investment, the ABC was forced to cut broadcasting content, and our remaining investment priorities far exceed our capacity to fund them at this point. These cuts were made under the Abbott government. We will see what the Turnbull government's commitment to the ABC and to clear election promises are through the triennial funding outcome in May. Nearly 3 years ago, the Gillard government allocated an additional $20 million per annum to the ABC to support enhanced news services, acknowledging the industry's loss of specialist reporting staff, the importance of local digital content and declining news investment in the regions. And the ABC invested this money wisely to the benefit of the Australian people. We delivered state-based editions of the ABC News website with more local stories. It was a shot in the arm for regional Australia, with extra reporters in the country and outer metropolitan areas. We had a national reporting team established with real specialisation to undertake investigative reporting across platforms and provide more in-depth reporting and context on critical issues. It funded important, major, in-depth primetime documentary series like The Killing Season and George Megalogenis's TV series Making Australia Great. And all of this and more has added to Australia's media diversity, created jobs and training, and gave us journalism to better inform our decisions and make democratic life more meaningful. The money has delivered, and under the triennial funding agreement, the ABC now needs to bid to keep that money and to keep going the services that it delivers. And that news funding represents 10% of the ABC's news budget, and to cut it now would mean significant cuts to jobs and programs. And if it was not renewed, it would represent the third substantial cut to the ABC's budget since the coalition government was elected on a platform not to cut the budget. Now, let me refresh your memories here. Just as there was bipartisan support in Parliament for the ABC's digital activity to be incorporated in its charter, the additional $20 million per annum also attracted bipartisan support. The then Shadow Minister for Communications, Malcolm Turnbull, welcomed it. He also said, and I believe him, that he was unaware of any planned cuts to ABC funding. Now, that's our immediate pressing challenge, but beyond this next triennium, the broader question of funding for the ABC in the years ahead remains. The reality is that the ABC has commercial activities and will continue to have some, but it makes a very minor net contribution overall. I can't envisage any plan to put advertising on ABC platforms. I'm pretty sure that any attempt to do so would trigger public outrage, which would only be trumped by outrage from Australia's advertising-dependent media players. And the evidence on this subject around the world is overwhelming. When public broadcasters start advertising, governments inevitably gradually withdraw their funding and the advertising increases to offset this. And then the programming that once distinguished the public media from the commercial media diminishes, as does the public broadcaster's relevance and importance as well. The only way the ABC will be strong and relevant in the future is with the government's adequate financial support. Australia has a long history of meeting its citizens' needs through public and private providers working side by side, public hospitals and private hospitals, public schools and private schools, and within the media, public and commercial working side by side. The ABC is a marvellous public good, funded for the benefit of all, available to be used by Australians everywhere. The ABC's commitment to the traditional broadcast platforms will continue. In the medium term, the ABC's largest audiences will be those who are watching and listening live to radio and television. But there's a new expectation now, that the public broadcaster will be where the public is, on their digital devices and on platforms. Just as it was expected that when television began in Australia, the ABC would be there, the public wants the ABC as part of the digital mix of the future. Now the public wants us to stream radio and television services. They want new programs created specifically for digital platforms, a personalised, seamless digital ABC experience. All elements of the ABC of interest to you, brought together for you, wherever you are, on your chosen device. One ABC. But the funding demands to meet these needs, to create the content, to deliver it digitally, are not insignificant. And as well as digital services, the content demands for the ABC to fill the gap left by commercial networks abandoning areas of traditional activity will grow. As commercial TV networks push for deregulation and fewer licensing requirements in the face of steep competition, it's reasonable to expect that commercial networks will shift investment away from quality drama, just as they've done in the past with serious documentaries and nearly all narrative comedy and satire. In pursuit of profitability, we will see a continued squeeze on investment in commercial newsrooms. We can see the impact of market forces on news outlets in the bush. People will expect the public broadcaster to step in and pick up the slack. And all this is a legitimate public expectation under the Charter. These enhanced or new activities deliver no new revenue new to the ABC, but we must deliver them if we are to remain compelling and relevant to future generations. Overwhelmingly, the discourse around the ABC, particularly in political circles, tends to be on the immediate. And of course, political concerns are invariably short-term, and it's hard to look beyond the news cycle. But lots of my conversations at Parliament House are about last week's program, last night's interview, and where's my Q&A invitation. The immediate pressures squeeze the more enduring issues from the agenda. Big questions like what will the ABC, what might it be or should it be 10 years from now? How to ensure this unique treasured public asset can be protected through the turbulent era of media transformation? How to ensure it's a centrepiece of the Australian experience? I appreciate the pressures on the public purse, scarce government funds, increased demands, and I know that the ABC will continue to pursue efficiencies aggressively. Yet looking to the future for public broadcasting, some solutions might already be before us. As I said when recently asked in Senate estimates, it's only right to think about how we best serve audiences and whether the current structure for public broadcasting is the right one. Clearly, both the ABC and SBS have loyal audiences, and these audiences were served in quite distinctive ways when each only had one television channel. But that model was created nearly 40 years ago, many lifetimes in media terms, particularly in television. SBS on television is very different to what it once was, and so is the ABC. Increasingly, the ABC and SBS have tripped over each other as each strives to meet its audience and programming needs best to maximise audience engagement. At times, we've even bid against each other for programs and content, and there have been scheduling frustrations as well. This has increasingly been the case as SBS has moved away from multilingual programming on its main channel in recent years as it pursues legitimately advertising revenue. And ABC2 and SBS2 are not distinctive offerings in prime time, particularly since SBS2 strategically moved to a schedule dominated by English and American programming acquisitions. And although there was no bidding contest, SBS was upset that the ABC showed the Asian Cup football. It was our top rating program for 2015. In isolation, these might be rational decisions and commercial decisions, but together are the ABC and SBS delivering the best return on public investment? And how do you protect and preserve the special role each broadcaster plays? As set out in the report released this week by the Australia Institute, in this digital era, if you wanted to create a new broadcasting service to serve multicultural audiences, you wouldn't create an entirely separate broadcasting organisation. Instead, you'd create a channel or channels. You could call it SBS, you'd brand it distinctively, but you wouldn't create an entirely separate and discrete organisation to do so, any more than Foxtel creates entirely new media companies every time it creates new channels. Separate channels can serve discrete and distinct audiences, just as News 24 serves a distinct audience, just as ABC3 serves a distinct audience, but with a streamlined and efficient back office. If you were starting today as well, I think you'd think carefully about whether the SBS advertising model is now sustainable given all the opportunities that are open to advertisers, and whether it makes the multilingual charter harder to deliver. And you'd think carefully about how you could maximise the effectiveness of the digital products offered by both, what you could create and what you could distribute. Now, I wouldn't imagine the radio services offered by the ABC and SBS would need to change. Each serves their discrete audiences well. And the ABC and SBS have worked more closely in recent years on transmission deals and other areas of joint procurement of services. We invited SBS to join the ABC in our new facilities in Melbourne. But there are limits to what can be achieved as totally separate and independent entities. By coming together, SBS and the ABC could still offer distinct brands under distinct charters, but it could do it without an entirely separate back office, standalone buildings, studios and technology, IT, legal, finance, HR and corporate divisions, or a separate board. We could spend more of the funding serving audiences. But most importantly, while preserving SBS and the ABC's distinctiveness and identity in this way, bringing the public broadcasters together would save an estimated $40 million per annum from the money that's spent on public broadcasting today. That's what the Boston Consulting Group found when they investigated the issue several years ago. And it's all about freeing up the money to invest more in content for audiences. I don't raise this, as some critics have suggested, because the ABC has failed to meet its own efficiency measures. That's simply incorrect. The ABC is committed to delivering the $250 million demanded by government, and we're on track to do so. I raise it because it's a real public policy option that could preserve services and distinctiveness while delivering real savings for investment in the broadcasters. And down the track, such a move could lead to even more substantial savings in the television area. Currently, the ABC and SBS can run together about 8 television services. But pending compression technology around transmission and restacking, the spectrum could allow even more channels to be delivered. But how many is the right amount? What services will be better delivered by broadband in years to come? What is the core public broadcasting offering? Better use of the broadcast spectrum could again free up much more money for digital investment without demanding more from the taxpayer. Bringing the ABC and SBS together was last seriously examined by government 3 decades ago. It's a difficult conversation to even start, with anxieties about the SBS being swallowed up and concerns at the ABC about SBS's commercial activity. There will be debate about the size of potential savings. And I know some love to reject the idea out of hand before we even contemplate the reform. But we need a grown-up conversation. And it is possible to start a sensible conversation on this. Some years ago, towards the end of his term as SBS Managing Director, Sean Brown and I had a number of conversations about how a peaceful merger might work. one that would safeguard a distinct identity and remit for SBS and allow the public broadcasters to be more distinctive in clearly delineated spaces with no overlap. No bidding against each other, schedules developed side by side to maximise specialist audiences using studios more efficiently, and shared back office support that would deliver economies of scale. We felt we could come up with a public broadcasting proposition for government that worked in the interest of audiences, the taxpayers, the broadcasters. A shared solution, not a takeover, but a friendly merger in the interests of the owners. But it wasn't to be. The idea was rejected at the SBS board level and Sean wasn't given licence to pursue the conversation further. It ended there. But down the track, I think the time will come for a real investigation of this possibility. We should see if there is a better way to use scarce resources to preserve identity, celebrate diversity, and present a richer, deeper, broader public broadcasting experience to the Australian people. These future matters will be for others to deal with, and I hope they take up the challenge. When Michelle Guthrie takes over the ABC in May, she'll find it in pretty good shape, I think. A place that's focused on opportunities, not obstacles, and she'll find a great team of people to help her there at the ABC, as I did when I walked in the door, never having worked a day in broadcasting in my life. And she'll discover that there's no better job anywhere. In my early weeks at the ABC, I did an extended radio interview with Julia Baird, and she asked me what I wanted to have achieved by the end of my term. And I didn't really have an answer about the end of my term, I'd only just started. But I began talking and I suggested to her that when I left, I hoped the ABC would be a strong and dominant digital media player in addition to its traditional strengths on radio and television. And I said I wanted to ensure that the stories we were telling talked about things that were important to people and really helped bring the country together. And I said I wanted the trust and reliance on the ABC to be stronger than ever before. I said I wanted it to be loved by Australians, respected and relevant. And in the decade that's gone by, we got some of that done. And in a way, it is still a fitting aspiration for the years ahead for an ABC to be loved, respected and relevant. When I started in this job a decade ago, I had no idea what was ahead. None of us had seen or considered an iPhone or an iPad. YouTube had just had its first birthday. Few had heard of Facebook. Twitter hadn't been invented. Netflix sent Americans their DVD movies in the mail. And most Australians, if they had the internet at all, experienced it unforgettably and even traumatically via dial-up. The only thing that remains constant from that world to now is that media law reform was imminent. But I'm pleased that with the dedication and commitment of the people who work there, the ABC has come through these early days of the media revolution as a vital and vibrant organisation. It is the independent home of Australian conversations and culture and stories. These things that are essential not just to our identity but our way of life. It's still part of the lives of millions of Australians who use it every day and who want it well supported. It is part of what makes Australia, Australia. All of us, including managing directors of the ABC, come and go. I go with a belief in the ABC that is undiminished. The public's affection, trust, respect and support for the ABC remains strong. May it outlast us all and may the ABC's best days lie ahead. Thank you.